The day had started like any other, a few quiet moments in the early morning, as the world went about its business, unaware of the storm that was about to hit Earth. Had always been a place of peace, for most its people had their struggles, but never anything so catastrophic, until now the first signs of the invasion came without warning. A rip in the sky, and then a massive flash of light followed by an explosion that could be felt across entire cities. Panic spread in a heartbeat. The very air seemed to tremble as thousands of ships filled the sky, each one brimming with alien technology and weapons designed to conquer. Humanity had never seen anything like it. The creatures who poured from those ships were unlike anything found on Earth. Their skin was a dull gray, their eyes glowed with an eerie blue light, and their weapons burned with unimaginable heat. Whole cities were reduced to rubble in mere moments as the aliens rained fire down from the sky and struck without mercy. Anyone who tried to fight back was swept aside like an ant underfoot in the chaos of the attack. The world's leaders tried to make sense of what was happening, but they were too late, too slow to react to the overwhelming force bearing down upon them. The Tyrallians were here, and they had no interest in negotiating or understanding. They had already decided humanity was nothing but an insignificant species waiting to be erased. Their commander, a towering figure with skin like polished obsidian, spoke through the broadcasting systems. He declared humanity's end with chilling certainty. No one could stop them. No one could stand in their way. They would rule the Earth as they had done with countless other worlds. This was not an invasion, it was a decree. As the world watched in horror, the terror only deepened. No one knew how to fight back. No one knew how to survive against such overwhelming odds, and for a while it seemed like the human race would be nothing more than a footnote in the annals of the Tyrallian Empire. But even in the depths of despair, something began to shift. A whisper among the people, small acts of defiance in the shadows, as the first shots of resistance were fired by those brave enough to stand up against the Tyrallian. Soldiers from every corner of the Earth joined forces, as if an invisible cord pulled them together. They fought not with a hope of winning, but with a determination to show that humanity was not going to roll over and die. In those first moments of chaos, it was clear that humanity would not surrender easily. It wasn't just the soldiers in the field, but every person everywhere working in small ways to make a difference. There was a sense of unity that had never existed before. Governments that had once been divided came together as one. It didn't matter that the humans were vastly outgunned. The Tyrallians had underestimated them, and it would cost them dearly. The Tyrallians thought themselves invincible, their technology far outstripping anything Earth had ever seen. But the humans had one thing that the invaders couldn't predict: ingenuity. They had no idea how to account for the creativity of a species driven by the sheer will to survive. Humanity wasn't ready to die, not today, not tomorrow, not ever. As the Tyrallians continued their brutal assault, humanity's resistance began to grow more coordinated. The first victories were small, but they sent a message: the tide could be turned. The human spirit could not be crushed, no matter the odds. The Tyrallians had underestimated the human ability to adapt and fight back. They assumed that Earth's military would collapse under the weight of their advanced technology, but instead humanity had begun to unify and find ways to outsmart their invaders. A small band of human soldiers launched a daring mission to infiltrate one of the Tyrallian command ships. They knew it was a suicide mission, but they also knew that if they succeeded, they could cripple the enemy's communication network and throw their forces into disarray. Armed with only their wits and a handful of stolen alien weapons, they slipped past the heavily guarded ship's defenses. Their mission was clear: find the heart of the command center and disable the communication system before they were discovered. Inside the alien ship, the atmosphere was cold and metallic. The Tyrallians moved with precision and purpose, as if the ship itself was an extension of their will, but the human soldiers moved with stealth and cunning, exploiting every weakness in the Tyrallian security. Their leader, a seasoned military strategist, had trained them for moments like this. He had taught them how to think like the enemy, how to use their enemy's arrogance against them. With each step, they grew closer to their goal. Finally, they'd reached the core of the communications center, a massive chamber filled with alien consoles and glowing interfaces. The human team worked quickly and methodically, planting explosives on the key systems, while one soldier kept watch for any sign of the Tyrallian patrols. They knew time was running out. The ship was bound to detect their presence soon, but they didn't flinch. Their determination kept them moving forward, each one knowing that their actions could alter the course of the entire war. As they planted the final charges, their cover was blown. Alarms blared throughout the ship and Tyrellian forces rushed in from every direction. The humans fought back with everything they had, using their knowledge of the ship's layout to create chaos and confusion. It was a brutal firefight, but they held their ground long enough for the bombs to detonate with a deafening roar. The Tyrellian command ship shuddered as its communication network was destroyed. The aliens had lost their ability to coordinate their forces, a massive blow to their campaign. The blast sent shockwaves across the battlefield, and though the humans had paid a heavy price in lives, their mission was a success. The Tyrellians were thrown into disarray. Their once unstoppable offensive was now fragmented and confused. They had no idea what had just hit them. Word of the success spread like wildfire across Earth's resistance movement. Soldiers from every nation, every background took heart at the news. They were no longer fighting in the dark. They were no longer alone. They had proven they could strike back, and they would continue to do so. United and unwavering, the Tyrellians had ignited a fire in humanity that would burn brighter than ever before. The war was far from over, but now the humans knew they had a chance to win, and that made all the difference. As humanity's resistance continued to gain momentum, something even more unexpected began to unfold. The Tyrellians were powerful, no doubt, but they had never encountered a species like humanity before. The more they fought back, the more humanity's ingenuity and resilience shone through. It wasn't just the soldiers on the front lines, but civilians from every walk of life who began contributing to the war effort. Scientists, engineers, inventors, and even historians all stepped up in ways no one had anticipated. As humanity's will to survive grew, so did their resourcefulness. One day, a group of archaeologists stumbled upon an ancient library hidden beneath the ruins of a long-forgotten city. The discovery was accidental, but it would change everything inside the library. They found texts written in languages that had been lost for centuries. These were not just ancient books, they were records of a time when humanity had once thrived among the stars, long before the rise of modern civilization. The more the scholars delved into the texts, the more they realized that humanity was not just an insignificant species on Earth. They were descendants of a great intergalactic empire that had once ruled the galaxy and left behind knowledge and technology that could turn the tide of war. The most astonishing discovery was a series of blueprints hidden within the pages. These blueprints were not for ordinary machines, but for weapons and systems that could reshape entire battlefields. They were complex designs beyond anything humans had ever created, but to the scholars they were a message, a calling that humanity had once been great and could be great again. The blueprints detailed everything from energy shields to advanced propulsion systems, and even weapons capable of disabling enemy fleets with a single strike. Soon after this discovery, humanity's brightest minds were brought together to begin deciphering and recreating the lost technologies. As they worked, they realized that the knowledge in these texts was not just about weapons, it was about strategy, tactics, and the very art of war. The texts contained insights from legendary human tacticians who had once fought great battles across the stars. Their wisdom was unmatched, and their strategies were timeless. The scholars and engineers pored over every detail, applying the ancient lessons to the current war effort. One particular strategist stood out, a quiet woman known for her keen mind and sharp instincts. She had been an unknown figure before the war, but after studying the ancient texts, she emerged as one of humanity's most brilliant military minds. Her understanding of the ancient tactics allowed her to predict Tyrellian movements and even outsmart their commanders. She quickly became a symbol of hope for the resistance. Her strategies turned the tide of battle, and soon her name was whispered in every corner of the world as humanity's greatest tactical genius. The Tyrellians, who had once thought of humans as little more than pests, now realized they were dealing with something much more dangerous. They had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt and evolve. The weapons humanity began to deploy were like nothing the Tyrellians had seen before, and they couldn't help but feel a creeping sense of doubt. The war was no longer just a fight for survival. It was a fight for the future of the galaxy, and the Tyrellians knew they were no longer the ones in control. As humanity unlocked more and more of its ancient potential, the world began to change. The people who had once been divided by borders and differences now stood united under a common cause, and with the knowledge of their ancestors guiding them, they were ready to face whatever the Tyrellians threw their way. Humanity's legends were being reborn, and the universe would soon come to see them, not as a weak species, but as warriors capable of shaping the fate of worlds. The tide of the war had shifted, but the Tyrellians were far from defeated. Their massive fleet continued to descend upon Earth with relentless force, and their commanders grew frustrated as humanity's resistance grew stronger. They had expected to crush Earth's defenses within weeks, but months had passed, and they were no closer to victory. Humanity had become a problem they had never anticipated, an enemy who fought with the heart of a lion and the mind of a strategist. In the heart of the resistance, the newly formed Human Military Command was about to unveil a plan that would change everything. The ancient texts had provided them with the tools to outthink the Tyrellians, but it was their creativity and ability to adapt that would give them the edge. This was not just about brute force or sheer numbers. It was about turning the Tyrellians' greatest strength against them. The humans would use their own arrogance, their belief that they were unbeatable, to orchestrate a trap that would hit the invaders where they least expected it. A multi-pronged offensive was launched with precision strikes, targeting key supply lines and communication hubs across the Tyrellian Empire. The attacks were carefully planned and executed with a level of coordination that stunned the invaders. Humanity had learned to fight like a shadow, slipping through their defenses without leaving a trace. Each strike was a small victory, but each one added to the larger plan to cripple the Tyrellian war effort. The Tyrellians began to question if they had misjudged their opponents. After all, these strikes were not random acts of resistance, but calculated blows from a species that knew exactly what they were doing. At the same time, a small elite unit of human soldiers, led by one of humanity's legendary war heroes, infiltrated the Tyrellian flagship. This was a high-risk mission designed to sow chaos among the Tyrellian leadership. Their goal was not to destroy the flagship, but to plant seeds of doubt and fear among the Tyrellian commanders. They would do this by planting misinformation and spreading false rumors about Earth's military capabilities. They knew that fear and confusion could be just as devastating as an actual attack. Inside the Tyrellian flagship, the elite human soldiers moved swiftly and silently. They knew they only had a few moments before the alarm was raised, and the entire fleet would be on high alert. They planted false intel on the flagship's communication network, tricking the Tyrellian leaders into believing that a massive human fleet was approaching from an uncharted region of space. The Tyrellians would soon be paralyzed with indecision and fear as their military leaders scrambled to organize a defense against a threat that didn't exist. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the human resistance was gaining strength. Every victory, no matter how small, inspired others to join the fight. Scientists and engineers worked tirelessly to develop new weapons based on the ancient blueprints, while civilians became a crucial part of the war effort, transforming everyday skills into tools of resistance. The global unity that had been forged in the heat of battle only grew stronger as humanity's determination reached new heights. The Tyrellians had made one critical mistake. They had underestimated the human ability to adapt and overcome. The more they attacked, the more humanity proved that they could not be broken. Their ingenuity, their ability to turn the tide of battle through cleverness and resourcefulness, had now become their greatest weapon. The war was far from over, but humanity had proven one undeniable truth: they were a force that the Tyrellians would never be able to crush. As the war raged on, humanity's resistance grew bolder and more powerful. The Tyrellians were now facing a completely different enemy from the one they had initially encountered. The humans were no longer simply reacting to the invasion. They were taking the fight to the Tyrellians with every strike, every sabotage mission, and every new invention. Humanity showed that they were capable of not just surviving, but thriving under pressure. No longer the underdogs, they had become a force that could not be ignored. As the resistance grew in strength, new heroes emerged from every corner of the globe, people whose names would go down in history as the champions who turned the tide of war. There was the legendary pilot who led the charge in the skies, her skill unmatched as she dodged and weaved between the enemy's most advanced fighter ships, taking down entire squadrons in a single strike. There was the scientist who had once been a university professor, but now designed weapons that could turn the very atmosphere into a deadly weapon against the Tyrallians. And there was the former mercenary, a man known for his ruthless efficiency in combat, who had become the leader of an elite battalion that fought with unmatched precision and deadly force. These individuals were not alone as their stories spread across the world. Others joined the fight from every nation. Every background people who once lived ordinary lives now found themselves at the forefront of humanity's battle for survival. They had all one thing in common: they refused to give up. They refused to let the Tyrallians wipe out everything they held dear. The battle for Earth had become a global effort. Humanity's military forces worked in unison with the resistance groups across the world. They no longer operated as individual nations, but as a single united front. Their collective ingenuity had become their greatest weapon. No longer content with defending themselves, humanity's forces began to push back the Tyrallian invaders, reclaiming territory one battle at a time. Each victory was a blow to the Tyrallians' confidence and a reminder that they had underestimated the resilience of mankind. In one of the largest and most daring battles of the war, humanity launched an all-out assault on a heavily fortified Tyrallian stronghold located on a desolate moon just outside Earth's orbit. The Tyrallians had used this moon as a staging ground for their attacks, and it had become a symbol of their domination over Earth. Humanity knew that if they could take the moon back, it would be a turning point in the war. The assault was brutal. The Tyrallians threw everything they had into the defense, but humanity was ready. Their forces were led by some of the greatest military minds on Earth who had studied the Tyrallians' tactics and learned how to outsmart them in a series of lightning-fast strikes. Humanity disabled the Tyrallian defenses and stormed the stronghold with an intensity that caught the invaders off guard. Within hours, they had breached the enemy's outer walls and taken control of the key structures on the moon. The Tyrallians were reeling. The loss of the moon was a significant blow, and they could feel the tide turning against them. Their once unshakable confidence was starting to crack. Fear spread among their ranks. For the first time since the invasion began, they realized that they were not dealing with an inferior species. They were dealing with a species that would fight for every inch of ground and never back down. But the humans were not done yet. They had taken the moon, but they knew the war was far from over. The Tyrallians were still a formidable force, and their next move would come with even greater ferocity. The resistance was ready. They had learned from their past victories and their defeats. They had become a true fighting force, a united species prepared to defend their home at all costs. And this time they knew that they would fight until the very end, no matter what it took. The Tyrallians had never expected humanity to strike back with such fury. The loss of the moon had shaken them to their core, and now every Tyrallian commander knew that the humans were no longer the weak prey they had once thought them to be. The invasion was no longer a conquest. It had become a desperate fight for survival. The Tyrallians regrouped and began to muster their remaining forces, but they could not ignore the one fact that now hung over them. Humanity had become the unyielding thorn in their side. The invaders had been too confident in their technological superiority, and now they were facing an enemy that had turned their weaknesses into strengths. The human resistance was no longer simply fighting to defend Earth. They were now actively hunting the Tyrallian fleet and looking for ways to cripple their war machine. Humanity had learned how to fight on their own terms, using tactics that the Tyrallians could not predict. The humans were masters of guerrilla warfare, striking from the shadows, launching precision attacks, and then vanishing before the enemy had a chance to retaliate. Their ability to operate with such flexibility had given them a distinct advantage over the Tyrallian forces, who were used to dominating through sheer firepower and numbers. In response, the Tyrallians began to change their tactics. They attempted to force the humans into large-scale battles, where their superior technology would have the upper hand. But each time they tried to do so, humanity found a way to evade or outmaneuver them. They had learned to use the terrain to their advantage to make every battle feel like a trap for the Tyrallians, who had grown accustomed to fighting in open spaces. While the military campaign raged on in the skies and on the ground, the war had also begun to spill into the digital realm. Humanity's engineers had unlocked a new kind of weapon, one that would not only change the course of the war, but reshape the very way humanity fought wars forever. A group of rogue hackers from across the world began to infiltrate the Tyrellian communication networks and their technology systems. It started with small victories, a shutdown of their supply chains, a sabotage of their navigational systems. But soon the hackers were able to gain access to deeper and more sensitive areas of the Tyrellian infrastructure. They discovered flaws in the Tyrellian operating systems that had gone unnoticed for centuries. Because of their technological arrogance, the invaders had relied on a rigid system of centralized control and data sharing. What the Tyrellians didn't realize was that this centralization made them vulnerable to a decentralized attack. Humanity's hackers exploited these flaws and began to systematically dismantle the Tyrellian infrastructure. From within, communications were intercepted and sent on false paths. Weapons systems were corrupted and disabled one by one. The Tyrellians found their greatest asset, their technology, turning against them as their fleets were thrown into chaos. Meanwhile, on Earth, the resistance movement flourished as humanity had adapted to the demands of war. Every nation contributed in unique ways. Civilians built weapons for the front lines. New technologies were developed and old ones were repurposed for a new era of warfare. Humanity no longer fought with the hopes of simply surviving. They fought with the certainty of victory. And with every passing day, their resolve grew stronger. They knew now that they were not only fighting to save their planet, but to reclaim their place among the stars. The Tyrellians had underestimated humanity's capacity for ingenuity and adaptability, and with each day that passed, they felt the weight of their miscalculation. The Resistance's success was no longer just a fluke, it was a growing force that no empire could ignore. The Tyrellians were running out of time, and the human war machine was only gaining momentum. Every small victory brought them closer to their ultimate goal, to take back Earth and drive the Tyrellians from the stars. As humanity's resistance continued to gain strength, the Tyrellians began to realize the war was slipping away from them. Every battle they fought seemed to end in failure. The weapons they had once relied on with such confidence were no match for the resourcefulness and cunning of the humans. The invaders began to question everything they had once believed about their superiority. The very foundations of their empire seemed to be crumbling as humanity proved time and time again that they would not back down. The Tyrellian leadership was divided. Some commanders called for an immediate retreat. Others argued that the humans were simply a fleeting nuisance that could be crushed with a decisive blow. But there was one thing the Tyrellians could not deny: humanity was not like any other species they had ever encountered. They were relentless, they were adaptable, and most importantly, they were united in a way the Tyrellians had never been united by anything except fear and power. The resistance grew more organized and more formidable. With each passing day, humanity began to reclaim its cities and its lands, driving the Tyrellians further from their foothold on Earth. It wasn't just the military that was fighting back now. It was every person from every walk of life. The entire planet had become a battleground, and no one was safe from the enemy's wrath. But no one was backing down either. The human spirit had been ignited, and it burned hotter than the Tyrellians could ever have imagined. In one final effort to end the war, the Tyrellians prepared for a large-scale offensive. They brought their most advanced ships into Earth's orbit with the intent to bombard the planet into submission. Their fleet was massive and their firepower unmatched, but they were not prepared for what was about to happen. Humanity had spent months preparing for this moment. Using their knowledge of the ancient texts and their newfound technologies, the Resistance had built a weapon that could turn the tide of battle in one devastating blow. The weapon was a massive energy cannon, designed to disrupt the Tyrellian ships' energy systems and cripple their fleets. It had been built in secret by the brightest minds humanity had to offer, and it was the culmination of everything they had learned in the war against the invaders. As the Tyrellian ships descended on Earth, they had no idea that humanity had this new weapon at their disposal. The final battle began as the Tyrellians launched their offensive. The skies above Earth were were filled with fire and explosions as their ships opened fire on cities below, but humanity was ready. The energy cannon activated and fired a single blinding beam of light into the sky. The Tyrellian ships shuddered as their energy shields were overwhelmed by the sheer power of the blast. The invaders had no time to react before their ships began to break apart, their weapon systems failing one by one. The Tyrellian fleet was in disarray. The humans had finally found a way to strike at the heart of their power, and they had done so with precision and power that no one could have predicted. The tide of battle had turned, and the Tyrellians were no longer the ones in control. Their massive ships began to fall from the sky as Earth's resistance continued to push forward. The invaders who had once thought they were invincible were now fleeing for their lives, but humanity was not content to simply defend Earth. They would chase the Tyrellians from the stars. They had learned too much and gained too much to ever stop fighting. This war was far from over, but now humanity had proven something undeniable. They were not just survivors. They were conquerors capable of reclaiming their future, and nothing would stand in their way. With the Tyrellians retreating, humanity stood at the precipice of a new dawn, but the cost of victory was heavy. The war had taken a toll on the planet, and its people's cities lay in ruins, and the scars of battle were evident everywhere. Yet there was a sense of triumph in the air. The Tyrellians had been driven from Earth, and their once overwhelming presence had been shattered, but the humans knew this was not the end. The universe was vast, and the Tyrellians were not the only threat that lurked in its depths. In the aftermath of the battle, humanity began the long process of rebuilding the world that had been broken, but they did so with the knowledge that they were no longer just a species hiding in the shadows of the galaxy. They had proven that they could stand toe-to-toe with the greatest empires in existence and emerge victorious. The legends of the war spread far and wide across the stars. Humanity had become a symbol of hope and resilience for countless other species who had been oppressed by tyrannical powers. Earth was no longer a planet of isolation. It had become a beacon of defiance, a place where others who had been subjugated could look to for inspiration. It was not just about military power or advanced technologies. It was about the will to fight for freedom and the strength to never give up, no matter how dire the odds. Humanity had shown the universe that they were capable of more than just survival. They were capable of greatness. As the humans began to explore the vastness of space once again, they encountered new allies and new enemies. The galaxy was full of wonders and dangers they had never imagined, but humanity had learned from their past, and they approached the future with caution and determination. The lessons of the Tyrellian War were never forgotten. Their people had learned to adapt to any challenge, and their unity was their greatest weapon. The human race was no longer a young species unsure of its place in the cosmos. They had earned their place among the stars, and they would fight to protect that place for generations to come. The legends of the war were written into history, but they were not the final chapter. They were only the beginning. Humanity had not only survived the greatest threat they had ever faced, but they had emerged from it stronger and more united than ever before. The Tyrellians had come to Earth expecting an easy conquest, and they had left in defeat, but what they hadn't realized was that they had awakened something in humanity, something that could never be silenced or destroyed. They had awakened a fire that would burn bright for centuries to come, and the universe would soon learn that humanity was not just a species to be conquered. They were a species that would change the very fabric of the galaxy forever. Earth had become a symbol of resistance and strength, but it was more than that. It was a place where humanity's true potential had been realized, and the legend of their victory would echo through the stars for all eternity, because in the end humanity had proven something undeniable. They were not just survivors of an invasion, they were legends in the making, and nothing in the universe would ever take that away from them.